Hello survivors and welcome to First Aid Spray, a Resident Evil podcast by fans for fans. This is episode 67 and in this edition we are going full Mayhem Mode as we take on the Ganado Horde in Resident Evil 4 Remake's Mercenaries mode. My name is Sai and joining me on the panel this week, like Krauser in his secret arm of doom, there's more to him than meets the eye. It's Fire Button Steve Valance.
Hi everybody.
Kaboom! Dynamite, bitch! It's Kelsey, aka KDB.
Begin.
And smashing those social media numbers like Hunk Snaps next, our special guest this episode, it's Andy from Biohazard Declassified.
Thanks for having us on, guys. Appreciate it.
Every episode of First Aid Spray is recorded live on our Discord server, so join now to hear the show early and unedited and to become part of our fantastic little community where we discuss life, the universe, and Resident Evil. You can find a link to the server as well as all of our social media profiles at our website, faspraypod.com. It's the support of our listeners that keeps First Aid Spray going, so why not check out our merchandise or our Patreon page. Tiers begin at just $1 a month. Head over to patreon.com/faspraypod for a full list and a chance to create bonus First Aid Spray content. Relatively light on housekeeping on this episode. It hasn't been too long since our gigantic 4-hour Resident Evil 4 special. If you've not gotten through that yet, understandable, but if you haven't started it yet, make some time for it. Nonetheless, we have picked up a new patron, so thank you to Hunter Johns for supporting First Aid Spray, and thank you to all of our patrons who now, if you're a Mastermind tier subscriber, you can check out, I'm not going to talk about what it is too much, but a sort of pilot for a new show, a new idea we're kicking around. So do take a look at that, and we'd love some feedback on it. Other than that, let's circle back around to our guest, Andy. The number one question I always like to ask everyone: how did you discover Resident Evil? What was the first game for you, and kind of what led you to falling in love with it so hard that you kind of, you're a big part of the community now?
Thank you for that. I guess it started off, I used to watch my parents play Resident Evil back in the day. So I was born in 1995, so I'm relatively a young chap.
The whippersnapper, yeah.
although I feel like my 20s are definitely going too quick. But yes, I want to say it was maybe 4 or 5 years old. I used to watch my parents play a lot of Resident Evil 2. I remembered all of my uncles and my mum, they was all playing Resident Evil 1 on the slimline PS1, and ever since then it's kind of stuck with me. I always have a saying about Resident Evil, like, people come and go in your lives, girlfriends, boyfriends, they come and go, but one thing that's always consistent is Resident Evil in some capacity.
Yep,
that's right, it'll never go away. It'll just, I believe it. I feel like, from my perspective anyway, it feels like Biohazard Declassified kind of came out of nowhere. Like, it hasn't been around too long, but as I understand it, you're like one of, if not the biggest Facebook pages for Resident Evil at this point. Kind of what led you to creating it or being a part of it and, that journey?
I think for us, for me, it was back in 2019. I mean, I was streaming on my personal platform in various capacities across, YouTube, Twitch, and never to a lot of avail, to be honest. And I kind of identified there was a bit of a gap in the market on Facebook. Facebook had recently launched its Facebook gaming platform, and at that time, I was modding a page called a group called Resident Evil Stars Posting. And I was part of that for a good 6 months, and I loved Resident Evil so much at that point. I would go on my personal profile and I would stream in that group. No face cam, nothing like that. Like, literally just the game and my microphone. There used to be like 150 people in there, just all talking about our love for Resident Evil. It was really good. Obviously, memes aside, of course. And then the idea for Biohazard Declassified come for, we want to take this out of the group. We want to make it kind of a dedicated news page, and initially really it was a meme page. In all honesty, we would just post relatable and newsworthy memes, and it become almost a selling point. It was like, right, if we start streaming on this, we start actually creating content around Resident Evil on this Facebook page. It was kind of, they initially come in, we hook viewers in by the memes, and they kind of stay for the streams. And that kind of methodology worked for a good year or so, and then Resident Evil 3 Remake was announced, and then it ended up going from like 10,000 followers to like something silly like 100,000 in the space of a couple of months. So
wow.
yeah, and then the other platforms just kind of joined behind it. But I mean, the grind never stops. The absolute grind never stops. I'm still hungry as ever. Still want to reach the next level. Obviously, now TikTok's starting to make big impressions in the gaming community, and I really believe TikTok is going to be another big player in this space.
Yep.
It's just a matter of time. It keeps me hungry at the end of the day.
I'd love to see it. Awesome. Okay, cool. Well, we stayed a little bit light on news on the last episode, so let's dig into the latest headlines. Steve, please take us away.
Our first piece of news, Resident Evil 4 Remake has sold up to 4 million units so far. Is that right?
Yeah, it's almost certainly more than that at this point. This is a report that I copied and pasted in here for the show notes of over a week ago. The game sold over 3 million copies within its first 2 days of release, to give you like a more honed in sort of situation, which is pretty ridiculous. It made it the second fastest selling Resident Evil in history within its first 2 weeks. So that's pretty cool. I mean, to be honest, Kelsey, did we see this one coming, to be honest? Because it is Resident Evil 4.
Yeah, like, it's kind of staggering, but also unsurprising as well. I think it's so important to kind of just think about the groundwork that's been laid over, like, the past, I'm going to, maybe like 10 years or just under 10 years, because if you think the late 2000s when all these action shooters just exploded, and that's all it was, to the point where even Resident Evil 6 went that route. And games kind of changed around the time of Alien Isolation and what's the other one? Amnesia and Outlast, and then Resident Evil 7. You could say PT as well, even though it was just a demo. And then Resident Evil 7 comes along, and I think it's there. Things started to shift, and horror games just became like... Yeah, we've been spoiled over the past few years, and then Capcom have obviously been a front runner with all that, with the remakes and with the new original games. And it's just so amazing to see that even in more recent times, games like Scorn, Callisto Protocol, Dead Space Remake, I think streamers are a big part of it, Andy obviously, and like other people in the community. And outside of Resident Evil, like just streaming horror games in general is a huge thing. And so Resident Evil Remake has come at this time where not only has like horror just re-exploded and it is so popular on, you know, online and with gamers again, it's Resident Evil 4, and it's the one that even the people who maybe didn't like the original games actually liked and played, so everyone kind of knows what it is. And then they've come along and just smashed it out of the park, and I think it's just kind of nice to see this pinnacle of wide appeal, and for it to be, you know, I was going to say our Resident Evil. We don't own Resident Evil, but, you know, it's been a journey sometimes, the Resident Evil, but it's back on top. It is the best. And even though this game has got a load of action in it, there's definitely a lot of horror. It wears the horror on its sleeve. And I'm just kind of buzzing to see the best at the top again, you know, with this genre of game, and to have such a good game.
For sure. I mean, to give it even greater context there, I just searched up what the situation is with Capcom's Platinum titles, you know, like their best sellers. 4 million units puts it pretty much in the number 20, the top 20 titles they've ever done already in the first couple of weeks. So it's tracking to be right up there. You know, over the last few years of doing the news, we've talked about Remake 2 and 7 obviously is now the best-selling single Resident Evil title, finally overtaken 5. We've kept a track of that, but it looks like Remake 4 is just going to speed through all those kind of expectations. Steve, how do you feel about the sales numbers?
It's not even been a month.
Not
even a month. Like, oh my goodness! I think it's like you said, it's coming from all angles, isn't it? Because there's going to be people who played the original RE4 and thought it was a landmark shooter, but didn't really like Resident Evil on either side. You've got the classic fans looking for a horror version of RE4. You've got the action fans going, "Yay, I can kick and suplex things again." So it's a big a cluster truck of people coming in to see it, and it's fantastic. Kind of feel bad for other horror third-person action games of the year. You know, looking at you, Dead Space, in the rearview mirror going, sorry, you know, Resi's back, and we're here to stay. I'm thoroughly impressed, but also terrified at how well it's going.
Yeah, for sure. We obviously, as I said at the beginning, talked about that game a lot already. But Andy, how did you feel about RE4 Remake in general? Don't go 4 hours like we did, just like a brief rundown. And do you think that the sales figures so far are fair?
Yeah, I believe they're fair. I think they're in line with certainly my expectations. I truly believe Resident Evil 4 Remake is not only a culmination of Capcom's efforts in the RE engine, but a culmination of remake storytelling.
Yes.
Even if we go back on that first point, specifically with the RE engine, that they debuted this engine back in 2017 with RE7.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And they've been tinkering different game mechanics. If you look back at Village, I mean, I was playing Village and I was like, man, this is a beta test for Resident Evil 4 Remake.
Yeah, a lot of people felt that way for sure.
And playing Resident Evil 4 Remake, I feel like that it's a beta test for Resident Evil 5 Remake. So, but ultimately, it's the reason why it's so successful is because people have been following the RE engine. They've been following Resident Evil Remake as it's gone along. 1, 2, 3. Obviously, 3. There's a bit of a bump in the road with Resident Evil 3, but this truly is probably the best it's ever going to get.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because to be fair, RE3, whatever you might think about it one way or the other, people are passionate about their side of the argument about it. So you're right, like people are paying attention to this era of Resident Evil, the RE engine era, and that sort of through line that we've had through 2, 3, and 4. It does make you wonder, in terms of not necessarily the games they're going to put, but sort of like the trend. Is the bubble going to burst with the remakes, or are they just going to keep pumping them out and they're going to get bigger and bigger and bigger every time? Hard to say, really. Hard to say. There's definitely a conversation to be had in terms of what remakes are coming, if any.
I just don't know where they're going from here now. I know this is probably outside of the scope of the podcast, but I just don't. Now that they've done Resident Evil 4, we always thought Resident Evil 4 was coming. They've concluded the winter storyline, which I think is absolutely the right thing to do with Shadows of Rose. I didn't think it merited another mainline Resident Evil game. Do they go and do another original Resident Evil game, or do they once again lean back to the past and retcon what they've already done, in the hopes that the time in between that they've learnt enough to then create a better game?
I think 4 million sales kind of tells me what they're going to do. Yes,
I think the temptation of just looking at titles that people are familiar with and remaking them, that makes it sound like I'm downplaying it, but like it seems like an easy goal, doesn't it, at this point, to just keep kicking these things in, because there's a mix of nostalgia and new excitement for all of them, really. So, beyond that though, certainly a web of what could happen.
Let's move the conversation on to our next bit of news, because it's pretty much interlinked anyway, what we're discussing.
Sure.
Our second news story is that the Capcom developers themselves are implying that there is now a separate remake continuity. And to add my little 2 cents to this, to my thoughts, if they're going to go wholesale with this, make it its own separate thing, go back now. We need to go back and commit a sin and remake RE1 yet again. Cement that.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Controversial takes
well,
about.
Everyone keeps saying RE5 or CV and like, Spencer Mansion, bro. Spencer Mansion.
Just to add at least a little bit more context to this, this news originally came from, as far as I saw it, our friends over at the Resident Evil podcast, and also Resident Evil Wiki is a sort of screen cap from a Japanese interview, but essentially translated Hirabayashi and Ampo referring to the recent remakes as their own continuity. And obviously, throughout our years on the show, we've talked about the timeline, canon. I famously have gotten up in arms a few times about such silly things. But it is interesting to see them talk about this. And you have to wonder if they've said this now specifically, not necessarily to deflect from some issues in how RE4 sort of lines up with stuff. let alone RE2R and RE3R, but also because they know full well that whatever they're doing next is also going to have some, perhaps even more so, major divergence. Kelsey, you're all about RE1 remake, aren't you?
Yeah. I mean, I've kind of had a gut feeling that it's always going to be coming. I don't think we're going to see the end of the RE engine without an RE1 remake. As far as the lore stuff goes, like, you know, I'm just as precious about it to a point. I think with the remakes, at no point did it ever bother me that they conflicted with any games that weren't remakes, because I just kind of accepted it. I accepted them as different things already, so them coming along and saying this just kind of confirms what I already assumed anyway. But at the same time, it also didn't really matter too much to me. I mean, you know, the other games are still there. We've talked about this over and over. It doesn't ruin anything for me. Some people I know are super, super protective, which is fine. I get it. But them saying this, it's like, we've got our RE Engine universe. That's because there's more games coming. And I think the very fact that we've had such success with the other remakes, and like I mentioned, with people streaming them and playing them, there are people, and this is not me just saying it for fun, like I know many people who really enjoy Resident Evil but cannot play the original games. They just cannot, because they can't get on board with tank controls, they can't get on board with the fixed camera and stuff like that, but they love Remake 2, they love Village, they love Resident Evil 7, they love Remake 3, and they love RE4. And if a Resident Evil 1 remake comes out tomorrow, they'll be first in line, and I'll be buying it as well. I'm happy to take another remake. Bring it on.
Steve, how do you feel about sort of this in terms of the continuity and the timeline stuff? Are you in the same boat? Does it matter that much, or is it like a really good thing? How do you feel about it?
I mean, I've always been of the opinion that the games themselves are like an unreliable narration of the events that happen. And, you know, you generally have to take into account of, like, you know, player actions and where players go, because you can't, for example, resolve RE1 in a canonical way. You can't resolve RE2 in a canonical way. RE3, Nikolai could live, he could die, but then he's got a note in Survivor, so on, yada, yada, yada. So the fact that these remakes have almost had their own solid continuity amongst themselves, at least, if they can keep bolting onto that, you know, exceptions with like a Tyrant in RE2. You know, I think it's the way to go to make its own stamp on things. If there's stuff that could be incongruous between them all, like, for example, the CGI movies being canon to both, it's fine. At the end of the day, I'm one of these people, if they change something, I'll just see it as another alternate universe. To me, there is an airsoft gun lore universe, because so much of it is nonsense and not referenced anywhere else. Sorry, they might have to bleep that. Like, there's that much nonsense lore from random bits of games that people get so precious about. And, like, why? Just it's a spoke of some random thing. Okay, the important stuff matters in, like, development of story, not like, it turns out they made this one kind of cheese on Rockfort Island, and it's this date. Like, I do not give two flying things about that. One iota. Just make an interesting story with lots of monsters and characters that like shooting stuff. I'm simple that way.
Yeah, I mean, I could get sort of, you know, in my core about dates and stuff, but
that's great. I like stories.
But the thing, to your point, it wasn't ever really that bad. But RE4R just kind of like having a chance to do something with Operation Javier and then just sort of completely changing it is really weird. But now, if they kind of go in this direction, it's not so bad. I can't take as much of an issue with it because, you know, Operation Javier is a slightly different thing in this continuity or whatever. Obviously, one of the big questions is Resident Evil 9 and even 7 and 8. Sort of what quote-unquote timeline continuity do they take place in? Do they take place in all of them? It'd be nice to get a really strong answer. Personally, for me, the way that I visualize it, if ever, you know, people might not necessarily understand this reference, but when the Zelda timeline came out in Hyrule Historia, and we have the split timeline, I kind of visualize it in reverse, where you've got your remake games and you've also got your originals that are the same, and then at some point, they do have to get to that point where they just meet in the middle. Whatever happened before doesn't get specifically referenced, but 7 and 8 probably are both part of both, maybe. I don't know. I guess
that's the funny part, isn't it? Because 7 and 8 are still divisive even now, but if they're the most concrete, still concerned canon to everything, be it remake timeline or classic timeline, you know, G1, if you will, I think that's beautiful, really.
Yeah. Yeah, so do I. And they are separated enough where it absolutely could work. they would fit with both. Andy, how do you feel about the continuity thing? Do you care about this kind of minutiae, or is it just us super nerds?
Yeah, I mean, not really, to be honest. No, the way I see it, they've kind of both got their strengths and their weaknesses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, especially with regard to, you look at Resident Evil 2 remake. This might be a slight digression, I appreciate. But I believe the whole point of the remakes, they're there to overwrite the need to go back and play the original. It's like the basic foundations of doing a remake. Resident Evil 1 remake definitely don't really need to go back and play the original unless it's out of pure nostalgia, in my opinion. Resident Evil 2, I don't believe that's the case. I still think there's merit in going back and playing the original over what they did in the remake, just because of some of the lore choices and the creative choices that they did do. I don't think Claire and Leon met nearly as enough as I wanted them to.
Right.
It was almost like they were exclusively talking through memos, which I feel like they could have done better. Obviously, 3 remake. There's no point in retreading old ground. I'm sure everybody has their own opinion about the 3 remake, but 4 remake, I think is very similar to 1 remake in that regard. That there is very little reason to go back and play the original.
Yeah, that's fair.
But yeah, in terms of like how the laws kind of intertwine and everything like that, I especially with the original later titles, I'll take your point, Si, that there has to be a kind of a breaking point, really, that they just go, right, they're in both universes.
Yeah, for sure.
If they do it, though, they really need to make like a big leap. There needs to be something dramatic that changes to differentiate these. Like, so far, Leon and Claire both still go to Raccoon City, both escape. Jill still fights a nemesis and gets the hell out of there. You know, something to completely break the continuities apart from one another. I think that's what we need right now.
Right. Well, in that case, I'm going to close the news off with one little thing that I will say then. If Resident Evil 5 Remake is happening, Wesker is probably going to live at the end.
Agreed. 100%.
That's absolutely what all of this is about, isn't it?
100%. It was a huge call, them making that decision in 2000 and what was it? 2009.
2009. Yeah,
huge call.
Deal.
I still thought there was so much mileage left in the character. It made sense. Obviously, it's kind of closure to the Chris versus Wesker conflict, I guess you could say. But I always feel like Resident Evil is Chris versus Wesker. It always has been Chris versus Wesker, and for them to cap that storyline off so early. Well, I suppose it wasn't so early, was it? Because it was like, I mean, how long was Resident Evil?
13 years.
I suppose looking back, yeah. But yeah, 100%, they're going to want to get as much mileage out of Wesker as possible. He does not perish in Resident Evil 5 Remake.
Chris will.
All right, well.
yeah,
let's do
in the
that.
turn of events.
And then Jill will avenge his death.
Yeah. Well, there you go. What a way to close it out. Right, so let's move on to our main subject of this episode, which is the Mercenaries. And now, reading the file Foreman's Log from Resident Evil 4 2023, Ignotus Sum.
October 11th. Today was the worst day of my life. It's my daughter's 5th birthday, but here I am, stuck on a mangy boat heading out to some backcountry dump. If it weren't for the pay, no one would be willing to work out in the middle of nowhere. October 19th. Those in the castle are always reminding us to take care during the excavation, but a few workers collapsed after inhaling some dust. There is something going on here that they are not telling us. There are too many secrets. I have started coughing too. I should sleep. October 26th. Something's really wrong with me. I threw up blood 3 more times today, and I'm so weak I can barely move. I never should have come here. I came for the money, but instead I am the one paying the price. I'm a terrible father. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. You deserve better. October. Since morning, head don't work. Why? More blood through up. Many insects crawling. I hear a voice. A fine day to work. Digging brings me so much joy. I am full of happiness. I offer it all to you. Everything for you, Lord Sadler.
Seems like we can't stop talking about Resident Evil 4 Remake, so here we are following up our Resident Evil 4 Remake podcast with the Resident Evil 4 Remake podcast, but it was inevitable, as we knew the game wasn't launching with Mercenaries, but as we mentioned previously, it's quite a nice surprise that it came so soon as well. Was it a week, maybe 2 weeks after the game came out? It was really, really super fast. It was weirdly fast, wasn't it? But nevertheless, it means that we get to talk about it now as its own little thing. I guess the first question... big behind the curtain maybe. Obviously, we do our little wish list episodes on YouTube now, and we did one for Resident Evil 4 Remake, and we decided let's not talk about Mercenaries because we'll do our own episode on it. Mercenaries came about so fast that we didn't even get a chance to do that. So we didn't really get to talk about our expectations, hopes, dreams, and whatever. So I guess the sort of main opening question, Steve, what are your expectations for RE4's Mercenaries, and did it match them? Because I come to you specifically because a while back, a few years now, we did a video on what you would do to improve Resident Evil 4, and you definitely touched on the Mercenaries. So it seemed like a good place to start with you.
Okay, so at the gate, we're missing a few characters, but we know that, that's generally how it's going to be. But the fact that Luis is here, Luis on their own, and they seem to be mimicking my entire spiel. I feel like Capcom watched my video and stole my ideas. Where's my royalty? No, I'm kidding. I like
Johnny Capcom.
I am glad that what is here in its present shape and form feels comparable to the original. We are basically one map short. And one Ada and Wesker, but we've gained a Luis, and everyone's got super modes, and it's a bit more dynamic than the original version of Mercenaries. I feel like there's still a lot of ground to cover, but what my expectations have been met for its current form, although I'm currently under the impression that more is coming.
Yeah, for sure. It's, I think I can say with some certainty, especially when you look at Village and it had DLC launched way after the fact because they weren't intending on making it, but the game was a success. I think they knew there was going to be a success. So there's obviously more to come. And if there wasn't, there's going to be more to come. In terms of what we started out with, though, Kelsey, how you feel about Mercenaries' sort of launch setup?
My expectations were low, to be honest. I think Village's Mercenaries left a bit of a sour taste in my mouth for a couple of reasons. One, because when it launched, as we know, it was just the Mercenary and not Mercenaries, so that was annoying. I wasn't crazy about the way it worked. I had some fun with it, but then when they brought more content to it, you paid to buy the new content, and then you still had to unlock it. So I didn't get to use all the new content, and I still haven't. I've still never played as Lady D on the Village Mercenaries. So, yeah. And then the original RE4, it was fun, but again, I didn't play it a great deal. I remember playing as Hunk a lot, and ironic, that's going to tie into something I'm going to say later as well. But what's funny is I actually have played the DS Mercenaries infinitely more than either the original RE4 Mercenaries or the Village Mercenaries. That game I loved and had a lot of fun with that, as the package that gave. So, yeah, my expectations were pretty low. I was like, oh, yeah, Mercenaries, that's cool, that'll be fun. But then kind of going into it, the fact it came just a week later is weird. I do not understand that at all. We all know why they left the microtransactions out for a week. That's so they wouldn't be in the reviews. But why leave Mercenaries out? It's really, really weird. But when it did arrive, it surpassed my expectations, and not just because they were low. I've been really impressed with this Mercenaries mode and the stuff that we have.
Andy, what were your expectations for Mercenaries? Did it match them?
Mixed. I would say definitely mixed. Enjoyable game mode. We'll start off by prefacing that it is an extremely enjoyable game mode in line with Resident Evil 4 Remake. I just felt like, and it's one that, as I've been streaming and whatnot, nobody ever talks about, and that is the Resident Evil 4 VR Mercenaries, which almost came out of left field. I did not expect them to drop a mercenary mode.
Yeah,
and
that's
that
fair.
Mercenary mode is so in depth. You've got all of the characters, obviously bar Luis, because it is still based on the original. You've got all the characters. You've got the original mode. You've got almost a challenge mode. It's the most bizarre thing ever. But the implementation of that challenge mode, I was really hoping would be in RE4 Mercenaries. I just feel like it came 2 weeks after the game. You know, we could discuss why it only come 2 weeks after the game. Why didn't they just, you know, crunch harder and get it into the game, or I don't know. It just doesn't seem like enough time, as you said earlier. There doesn't seem to have been enough time. It didn't come out like 6 months later, or 3 months later, 2 weeks later. How did they not have that ready anyway? And yeah, having one of the maps missing, which obviously points to a certain inevitability that we probably won't talk about.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, I sort of land on a similar thing, really, where I was kind of hoping for a little bit more to do, as you say, like a challenge mode thing. It's a really great point. It's just something like that. I will say that I think I said about the Villagers one that I actually quite enjoyed it because I liked Villagers gameplay quite a lot. I haven't really gone back to it too much. That being said, when the new characters came, I just loved how goofy it got. So I was hoping we had a bit of that in here, and we do with the Mayhem mode, which obviously we'll go through. We're going to talk about every character. So I'm glad, Steve, as you said, they've all got their own sort of superpower, because that is something that we talked a bit about. This game is probably going to come up a few times in this episode, rather unfortunately. That's something we talked about that was kind of favourable about RE-verse, and maybe what we would like to see out of it more so is sort of more personalised characters. And RE4's Mercenaries sort of classic version always had that, because they've all got their own loadouts, and especially someone like Hunk and especially Krauser feel very individual. So the fact they've got even more now by having like their own superpowers and stuff is pretty cool. But yeah, it does feel a little bit like there's a lot more potential there, but we'll get into that certainly. So yeah, let's start talking about each character, I guess, and our experience with that character. Kelsey, let's start with Leon. How did you feel about going in with well, to be fair, I guess also a question related to Leon. Did you feel kind of sort of let down by the fact you had to unlock characters this time around as well, and how did you feel about playing as Leon?
Well, not this time about unlocking, because, you know, the update was free, Mercenaries was free, and it arrived, and I could see that there was a character to unlock, and it's not something that I paid for and was expecting a load of new content. You know, it's kind of I bought the game, and it's just like I feel like I don't really have a right to complain too much about what I'm not getting. But anyway, so that didn't really bother me, and I, as someone who wasn't necessarily like, oh, I can't wait to play as Hunk or something like that, it just didn't bother me. So I saw that there was a few there. I was like, okay, great. I assume they'll just unlock as I play, and then started with Leon, and I think instantly, it's funny because I haven't played I've played as every character and ranked on every map, but Leon is definitely one of the second ones that I played with the least. But starting with Leon, I was just, as someone who prefers the horror of Resident Evil and going into Mercenaries mode knowing, okay, it's not really horror, it's just, you know, shooty fun stuff. I was just kind of blown away at how tense the whole thing was, and I loved that he had lots of different weapons to choose from, but I was playing it and instantly, even though my expectations were low, was having so much fun, and being able to switch around weapons with Leon is a big part of that. As the first time I hit the Mayhem mode, I was just kind of like, it's like being on a roller coaster, you know, you're sort of going up and down and running around the village, and then you hit that, and then you're suddenly dropping down a huge thing and firing at like 100 miles an hour. And yeah, I think I was just smiling and absolutely having a blast. I'll get to it with the other characters. I've used him less because I think once you find your skill, the thing that works to your skill set in Mercenaries, that's it. You kind of can't really go anywhere else. Like when I see people S++ing with everybody else, I'm just like, I don't know how they're doing it, because I need something that plays to my strengths. And I definitely found it with one of the characters, and it was not Leon. It definitely wasn't Luis either, which blows me away, Si, because I think you did amazing with him straight away. But we'll get to that. Yeah, I think Leon is a great introduction. He has, varied weapon loadout. He's a bit sluggish. That's the sort of thing. Maybe potentially there's this, because I'm playing on Xbox, and there is this issue with the dead zone on Xbox, and I wonder if that makes that plays into playing Mercenaries. You can't strafe as quickly.
I thought they'd patched that. Not to interrupt, but I thought, at least I have had a significantly better time of recent.
I mean, I haven't played as Leon for, I guess a week now or a few days. I've just been playing as somebody else. So, maybe it was that. But I just felt when I first started RE4, it felt a bit sluggish, and maybe that carried over a bit to the Mercenaries. I touched on the main podcast, sorry I'm rambling now, but just how the movement and lack of dodge was a big issue for me. I just think if there was a dodge in this Mercenaries mode, I'd be flying with a character like Leon, but I
almost feel like it would make it, you'd be too overpowered, to be fair.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. But yeah, it's fine. He's I don't want to call him generic, but yeah, he's the all-rounder, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that is kind of, generic is kind of a harsh word, but I get what you're saying, though, because he is just sort of meant to be your baseline character. So in that sense, when you compare him to everyone else, it does feel a little bit boring. Like, he's got 3 guns, but you're kind of like, yeah, but it's not really that exciting compared to some of the other weird gimmicky stuff. And even his Mayhem mode, which is cool, increased attack power and movement speed. That, compared to the other ones, is kind of like, it's all right. It's not my favourite either, particularly. Andy, how did you get on with playing as Leon?
Substantially better than the original. Substantially better.
Okay.
I always felt it was so daunting. Like, whenever I started I completed Resident Evil 4 on the million consoles it ended up being on.
Yep.
I always felt like when I jumped in as Leon, I was like, oh man, this is going to be a really tough couple of hours just trying to get the 60k or whatever it is, or 50k to unlock all the other characters. But that Mayhem mode's changed everything. It really, really has. It's made playing as Leon so fun. So fun.
I know specifically with Leon of that, and it's because it's sort of everybody's first experience with the mode. But I did go from sort of like immediately sitting upright, kind of yelping with panic because all the enemies are suddenly, and you don't see where, because you're concentrating on shooting certain ones, you don't see where all the rest of them have come from. You turn around and there's like a dozen new, and you're like, oh goodness. But yeah, when you hit Mayhem mode for the first time when you play Mercenaries, those sort of like yelps of surprise and panic become sort of some sort of twisted elation where you're like ha 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 and mowing everyone down. Steve, how did you get on with Mr. S. Kennedy?
Well, it's like Kelsey really said. Like, he feels, protagonist man is now here to fight.
Terry Blanchard.
Here's your Shoto character in Street Fighter terms. He's very generic in the best possible way, because he's literally got he's got the most weapons, and his skill is literally just being better with those weapons and moving faster. But the feeling of when you hit it is also like, I'm pretty sure BFG division kicks in, at least mentally, because the shotgun's just like churning through people. So that equalises him to make him a lot more interesting than his original counterpart, certainly. The only thing is, if my mind keeps going to, if they do a Mercenaries game, is Leon's ability going to just be, I am the normal but faster? Because it feels very... Not a character trait of Leon, if you know what I mean. Just very, it's okay to play as. Literally a great experience to translate from the original game, from playing the main game, which is fairly stressful, to this. It's a great introduction, but it doesn't feel like no one's going to turn around and say my favourite is Leon because he plays exactly the same as he does in the main game. His quirk is he has more guns than everyone else and he shoots faster. It's not the most exciting. It's fun, but okay.
Yeah, it's funny actually because it reminds me a little bit of RE-verse in the sense that his ability is just get a second gun, which is fine. Just means he's more attack power and he's shooting faster, so it's kind of similar. So maybe that is...
I mean, his special move in RE-verse is a kick.
Well, yeah, which is just he gets a standard. So yeah, it did make me think of that kind of in a funny way, but there you go. But yeah, he is sort of... standard utilitarian character, so I guess that works.
To phrase it, okay, chicken tikka masala is fine, but we can go better.
Fair enough. Okay, so let's get into the probably, I would imagine, the most divisive character, the brand new character. So in a way, the most exciting character. As Steve, you said playing as Luis was something that probably, well, I mean, it's the most obvious missing element from the original RE4, isn't it? Really.
Mm-hmm.
So Andy, how did you get on with Mr. Luis Serra Navarro?
I thought it was brilliant. Again, a welcomed addition. I was, posting up to the lead up to Mercenaries, like, why wasn't Lewis ever included in the original? It just seemed like such an obvious character, but we are where we are. I loved the Mayhem mode, the whole invulnerability and the dynamite. Oh, it was glorious. It was absolutely glorious. Just destroys bosses like anything. Really fun to use, but again, just retorting some of the points earlier about just being sluggish. I can definitely feel that.
He's definitely the most like that, I think, and obviously that's intentional because his melee takes forever to come out and it's not particularly powerful, though it does have a bit of a range on it. But yeah, so he does. I feel like he's the most sluggish, being the absolute word, especially because his weaponry also feels kind of slow to come out as well. He's got the sort of janky sniper rifle that needs the lever action every single time, and the Red 9, which has sort of gone from being like the sacred handgun of Resident Evil 4 to being something that some people love and some people hate in the remake. And I was watching James, who sadly couldn't join us for this podcast, play Mercenaries in our Discord server, and he just did not get on with Luis at all. And I'll tell you what the reason is, Kelsey, this might explain my absurd score that I got right out of the gate, is that I didn't use a laser sight at all in the campaign, not once. So I guess I was just used to it, whereas James was just like, I just can't aim without one now. Yeah. So I guess maybe that's, I don't know, it was just luck, but it's gone. I put the game down for a week and come back to it like sort of last night. It's gone tragically downhill with me and Luis. We had a good thing to begin with, but it's not so great now. But it's all about timing those dynamites, baby. You can get 3 of them out if you're really good as sort of one Mayhem mode, and it's absurd what you can do with it and what you can get away with it. Just as you said, Andy, takes out bosses instantly, some of them, which is especially funny when you put one down and you don't know it's there. Like taking out the chainsaw Ganado before you even realise he's about. It's really, really good. Steve, how did you feel about Luis? Did he live up to your hopes and dreams?
Yes and no. Like, it's nice to finally get the Red 9 and the vintage sniper in Mercenaries, but both don't have the punch they used to. So Daddy's a bit gutted. But the fact that Don Quixote can pull out his spear and then use it like a baseball bat is hilarious.
Yes.
There's that meme of you call dynamite throwing a martial art, and then there's just a picture of Luis over it. It's amazing. Because my general strategy is when Mayhem Mode, it just gets saved when bosses turn up, and then I just chuck a dynamite stick at my feet and blast it and laugh. Like, I'm not getting the best skills. I don't think he's like going to be... He feels like the most tricky character to use because his guns take half a year to reload. But his actual action skill equalises it a fair bit because he literally can just dominate with it, and he has a nice cute little shoulder check, which is surprisingly wrestling-y. It's not quite the levels of Josh in RE5, but I'll take something like that. It's a bit more unique to kicking someone or punching someone or stabbing someone. It's like a shoulder charge or lancing them, which is funny.
In terms of that attack, actually, I'm glad you mentioned it because it does feel like to me, in the spacing of it and the lead up and the effect, kind of like Carlos's straight punch from Remake 3. Very similar in that sort of clearing kind of way. Kelsey, how did you feel about Luis, the connoisseur's pick, I feel?
I'm definitely not a connoisseur. I could not... I remember because I think I jumped on this game just before you, and so the first time I played as Luis, I activated that Mayhem mode. First, I realised I was using the Red 9. I was like, oh god, here we go. Like, I can't use that weapon. I just cannot get on with it. Like, the reload is slow. I miss every single shot. Like, I'll hit 1 out of 9, and I just don't know what's going on. And then I used the Mayhem mode, and I had just had no idea what was happening. I was like, I'm sure I can hear some dynamite, and then it would just blow up. And I still didn't know what happened. And then, because I didn't read the descriptions of what their bonuses are or anything. I jumped straight in. And then I got Mayhem Mode again, and then I was like, what is he doing? He's putting dynamite on the floor. I was like, right, okay. So I put one down and ran away, waited for it to blow up, and then it blows up. I was like, okay, that's rubbish. So I put dynamite down, and then I just got to wait for it to blow up and hope I don't get attacked. And then it wasn't until... So I was watching... I watched a Bok Soup video of... getting S++ on Mercenaries. No shame, I just wanted to see how he did it. And then I watched him play as Luis and putting the dynamite down and shooting it, and then down again and shooting it, and putting down like 6 sticks of dynamite and shooting it.
Wow.
And I thought, oh, right, okay, so that's what you're supposed to do. So I went back, had another go. No, I just can't do it. Every time I'm putting the dynamite down, I'm then like struggling to aim with that red 9 and shoot it. Or if I do shoot it, I just then take ages. And I don't know what it is. Sometimes like I like to think I'm like not terrible at video games. My scores on these mercenary modes are, I have S+ with Leon and everything. I have S+ and an S with Krauser. I have S++ with Hunk on everything. With Luis, I have like A, C, and A. And I just cannot...
Amazing.
I don't know what it is. And I think I've tried to wire my brain. And I love the character. Came away saying he's the MVP of RE4. I still love him. But just, I don't know what it is. Like, for this mode, I think for a mode where you have to... My strength, I talked about strengths with Leon. You find your niche and then you can smash through it. My strength was Hunk, which I'm going to get to. And you've got to be really good with that red 9, I think, to work with Luis. And yeah, just could not do it. He still has a special place in my heart. But I saw your score. I think your first score, it was over 1 million, right? You got S+ or S++.
I don't know.
Yeah. And I remember coming away like, just how I can't do it. It's so funny. Like, can't do it.
Yeah, I think to be fair, what I will say about Luis's inclusion here, what I really, really love, because we're about to talk about 2 characters that, no, let's get out of the way, arguably are very broken. But Luis, like, his inclusion is really cool because he is a challenging character to use.
Yeah.
Like, it's about space, it's about timing, it's about luck. Like, I've struggled with it as well, so I love that he sort of makes up this selection of characters and adds his own uniqueness, his own sort of challenge to it. So, yeah, big fan of that. And now, reading the file Old Man's Journal from Resident Evil 4 2023, Jay from the Cold Takes podcast, who you can follow on Twitter at ColdKnight_GAMI1.
3 years ago, my beloved daughter passed away shortly after giving birth to a son. Since then, the boy has grown considerably. He is a very curious child and has a true thirst for knowledge. He even tries to follow after me when I go out hunting. I can't take my eyes off him for a second. Whenever we walk in the forest, he always asks me to tell stories. He's very fond of Don Quixote. Although he's still small, the boy's smart and observant beyond his years. If he weren't stuck here, he might have become a scholar. I was a careless fool. I could have sworn I shot clean through the wolf's head, and yet it lunged at me. I was able to make it back to the cabin, but my wound is swollen and discolored. I cannot bear seeing the boy's worried eyes. My body moves on its own, and I can hear voices inside my head. Am I going mad? I can't die now and leave the boy behind. Dear God, please protect him.
So yeah, let's talk about broken. Let's talk about Krauser. Kelsey, how did you feel about Krauser and his giant arm of doom?
Yeah, like, it's ridiculous. And he initially was the character that I was getting all my high scores with because, he's very overpowered. I didn't know that you can kind of combo his melee attacks really well and dart around quickly. I didn't discover that until, much after a couple of hours of playing or whatever it was. But first time playing as him, I didn't really expect much. I just thought, okay, Krauser, cool. But then when you get to use the Mayhem mode and he just transforms, it's like, I mentioned with Leon, it's like a roller coaster. Every time you're being surprised. Now with Lewis, obviously, I didn't know what was going on, but then I moved on to Krauser, and I was like, yes, we're back. Like now, there's something I can use because you can just stomp and swipe your way through. And he is a character that I guess if you're not going to do too well with the weaponry and the shooting, you can just have so much fun on Mercenaries because you can just you can walk through and slaughter the mobs. And for someone who, like, I don't really have any big affinity towards Krauser as a character. You know, originally he showed up out of nowhere. No one knew who he was. I like the extra context we've got in the remake. I quite like the performance as well. Playing as him here in Mercenaries has made me like, oh, I want to get like a Krauser tattoo or something. Like you feel like you feel like super bad. I'm not going to, but it feels super badass playing as Krauser. And it wasn't until I think somebody on the Discord, it might have been our buddy Green Man, mentioned, yeah, Krauser's a bit overpowered, isn't he? And I was like, oh, maybe I thought I was doing quite well at Mercenaries with Krauser, but it turns out, yeah, he just is a good way to slaughter everyone. So he's good fun. I mean, you know, visually it's awesome to just play. I think thinking about, you've mentioned RE-verse a couple of times, Si, and you know, my heart is still broken. The opportunities we had to have fun with the BOWs, it was little glimpses we got there. And Krauser's another example here, like actually playing as a BOW and, you know, somebody that's got a horrific transformation thanks to the virus or the parasite could be a lot of fun. And yeah, maybe with some tweaking, but really big fan of Krauser, despite the ridiculous broken nature of it.
I'm really glad that you said that last bit, especially because I mentioned the fact that we were thinking about doing a wish list episode, and I already had my ideas kind of roaming around my brain. And I'm not going to save this for when we talk about the future of Mercenaries, because I don't think this is going to happen in the slightest. But my pie in the sky dream for RE4 Mercenaries was being able to play as BOWs, being able to play as Chainsaw Man, being able to play as the Ganado, or the Garador rather. I don't think that's going to happen, but Krauser is at least that little insight into it, as he's always kind of been. Yeah, Krauser's loadouts, you know, as it was before, the variation's great. You've got the exploding bow, you've got the TMP. In this time around, it almost feels like it's intentional that you will run out of TMP ammo pretty damn quickly. It kind of works out that way, which forces you to use the knife, which then you realise, oh, I don't actually need any guns. Like, I can just not, like, it makes sense because he's the knife man. You can just, and I've seen that runs exist on Mercenaries of just melee runs for Krauser, and I can absolutely believe it because that knife does 90% of the work, to be honest. Andy, how did you feel about Krauser?
Yeah, I mean, man's indestructible. He really is. He almost feels like, do you remember like on RE5 Mercenaries where Wesker used to have that ridiculous dash?
Yeah.
But the thing is with Wesker's dash is you could almost use it as a bit of a detriment to yourself because it takes health off. So when I was playing as Krauser, I was expecting, okay, right, I am absolutely turning everyone into Swiss cheese here, but what's the trade-off? But there just isn't. It's just, no, just go ham, you know? But yeah, very, very enjoyable, very enjoyable. I love it. It does, I mean, you could argue it's a bit of almost an easy mode character. But even though it's kind of a bit, you know, you have to unlock the stages to get there. But if you just want to go into Mercenaries and just go ham, not have to worry about any implications whatsoever, jump in as Krauser.
Yeah, this is the take out your frustrations character, isn't it, really? It's the character that I got the highest ranks with, you know, across a board the quickest, easily. He's just absurd. Steve, how do you feel about Krauser?
Pretty much the same. Like, he's the ultimate solvent to if you're having a salty day trying to do professional or something else. Just play as Krauser for a bit of Mercenaries and you'll feel all right as rain, because you are literally their boss fight. They have to survive you. You know, it's insane. I mean, the original Krauser had literally the bow and flash grenades. Now he's got the TMP and the knife of, like, kill everything. You know, you have two modes. You have slow sweeping stabs or quick jabs and dashing around and beating the crap out of them. The problem is, I get stuck into a rhythm when I play as Krauser. I just start just smacking people constantly and I run out of time. Like, if I don't actually focus on killing people, I'm just beating the. I have a Mayhem mode I never use. Like, I'm just too busy stabbing, and it says a lot to my character, really, that I'm more content to just beat things to death than shoot them or use the exploding bow. He literally feels like he doesn't need half the stuff he's got. He's that overpowered.
Yeah.
Which is amazing, really. He's going to get the hand cannon for anybody. That guy, definitely. Every character should be as busted as him. If they're all going to be busted, let it be this broken. Goodness me. I wasn't expecting anywhere near this level of deadly. The original version of Krauser is the easy mode character in the original RE4 Mercenaries because he's got that one-shot lunging stab, which he still has. But now he's got fast dodges and ducks and knife combos for days. It's someone's favourite character is Krauser at Capcom HQ, and they proved it with this. If he was in RE-verse, the meta's broken. If he was in Resistance, the meta's broken. Wherever this man goes, I don't know why he had a need to get the Plaga, because if he was this strong without it, man.
Yeah, that's fair. I think it speaks to Mercenaries that we can have characters like this that are broken.
We haven't got into maps, but I think every other character has a sort of catch flaw, but he's solved pretty much most of his problems, with melee, let alone anything else. He can stun lock it. He can use the claws to rip anything that's mid tier apart in one shot, and then he's got explosives on top. It's solved game.
If Leon is the all-rounder, Krauser is the all-rounder plus. Okay, so that brings us to our final character of the original selection, which of course is Hunk, Mr. Death himself, with his unlimited ammunition Mayhem mode, and of course the LE5. What else could it have been other than that? Andy, how did you find playing as the Grim Reaper again?
Super pop when I saw the neck break return.
Yes,
huge pop for that. I mean, out of probably all of them, one of the only characters that is pretty much like the original incarnation, obviously minus the Mayhem mode. It was a great time. Activating that Mayhem mode was beautiful. Just watching everybody melt like that scene in Rambo,
it really is, isn't
Rambo
it?
4. It was absolutely glorious. Absolutely glorious. Great to see Mr. Death. I'm pretty sure it was what's the soundtrack called? Is it Lumin Dread?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, made a return, which was quite nice.
Yes, actually, we'll talk about music after this because I realised I didn't put that in the show notes, but we definitely need to. Yeah.
Brilliant stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's a rare. I don't think I've had any other occasion, and it might just be because I haven't used the sort of infinite whatever here and there weapons. But I've not had an occasion in the RE engine where I can just hold down the fire button and not give them monkeys, which I really, really like. Steve, how did you find Hunk?
Pretty much the same as everybody else. This is fun. Oh god, we're snapping necks. There's a boss. Mayhem mode. Again, the Doom music kicks in, and all of a sudden, everyone in the village dies. Everyone in the island dies. Everyone in the castle dies. It's just, it's good because Hunk literally lives up to the reputation every time, and I like the fact that his moveset now, his physical moves. I know he's got the neck break, which is of course iconic, but he's got his little stab knife thing from the 3DS game has been added as his suplex era kill. I don't know what else you want to call it. Which I think also was in Revelations 2. So he's got references to his other versions. I kind of wish there was more some kind of sound effect for him though, or one-liners, because Leon gets his one down and so on, but no one else does, and Hunk seems like the perfect character for it, like Tango neutralized or something, right. Scary and Grim Reapery. But to play as, incredibly satisfying and worthy of the name Grim Reaper, because that man enters a stage and 9 times out of 10 you're doing the whole 150 Ganados.
Yes, and as you quite rightly said, the bosses are nothing.
Yeah,
as long if you stun them, they're dead.
He can't neck snap a Garador, but everything else.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Yeah, it's ridiculous, to be honest. Utterly ridiculous. Kelsey, how did you feel about Hunk? You've already said he's your favourite character, so as they say, go off, sis.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, I think, Steve, you just said something there which is so, like, apropos, is where you said Hunk, he's always living up to his reputation. I can't think of a single Resident Evil Hunk appearance where anybody thought, oh, that was a bit lackluster or rubbish. He's just so, yeah, he's persisted and sustained his iconic, nature for 25 years. When was it? Yeah, Resident Evil 2, 25 years. And here in the remake, for a start, it's nice to play as Hunk and be able to actually shoot, because, I'm used to doing, fourth survivor runs where you're generally not attacking much. You're just kind of trying to savor your ammo and run past everything and stuff like that. Playing as him in Reverse, we got the little taste of potentially good stuff, as we've said in the past, and it was nice to use Hunk there. But here it's like a throwback, obviously, to the original Mercenaries, and it's full-blown Hunk. So much fun. He is the character that I've S++'d everything with. But what I want to say is, you guys are sort of all make it sound like, oh yeah, you could just mow down everybody. Like, I'm not going to say I didn't do it like first time or anything. It took me a few tries and some practice. Particularly, I think I really struggled with that S++ on the castle. I just kept finding moments where because I think with Hunk, if you want to get S++, I don't think you can break your combo. I think, you have to get all 150 enemies. And so, that's kind of challenging in itself. And I was really committed, had so much fun with him. The neck break, which Andy mentioned, of course, I think I cheered a little bit to myself when I first did that. And just absolutely love playing as him. Steve's right, we could have done with some sassy one-liners or something. I think that would have been the icing on the cake. What else is there to say? I mean,
he's got jazz hands.
One other, he does. One other thing I will say is, I mentioned it's maybe not as easy as you guys are making it sound. Like, there's not many games, honestly, that make me rage. This idea of rage quitting and stuff, like, it's not something I've ever really done. Maybe with a couple of games. One of them is Crash Bandicoot, by the way. Like, I don't know if anybody's played that in recent years. That game
that's fair. I get that.
It's absolutely toxic. I will turn that off because, I've just become a horrible person. Playing as Hunk, trying to get that 150 combo, I definitely had a couple of situations where one of those enemies would just grab me out of nowhere. And, this is what I mentioned about the lack of a dodge and stuff like that. And I'd be so on a roll and that combo would start flashing. I'd be ready to take out somebody in front of me and then I would just get grabbed from behind. And I think because I played with Hunk as the most, it's just happened a lot with him.
Yeah.
And I won't say the words, but a lot of the worst 4-letter words you can think got screamed at my TV multiple times. But a lot of fun. I can't believe, I know we're sort of wrapping up characters, like how much fun I've had with Mercenaries mode. I mentioned at the start, I played a lot of that DS game. I love that DS game. It's so easy to pick up and play and challenge yourself. And I think the package you got there of all the characters was really good. We're going to get on to the future hopes for this. But I think if we want to call this a starting point, there's big smile on my face. Like for this podcast, like I've made a few notes, but I haven't had too much to say other than just such a blast playing as it. I mean, what's there to criticize really about just going nuts with Hunk and his infinite ammo? Like you said, Si, just hold down the trigger and mow everybody down. He's a good frustration, a good way to burn off the frustration as well as Krauser.
I love that you say about your notes because I thought, it's going to be a really relaxed podcast and there's not a whole loads of complex thing to say about Mercenaries other than you're right, it's just fun. My only note for Hunk is lol. But to be fair, to your point, I don't think I've lost the combo so much with Hunk, but I have died because I've cared too much about it than anything else. Yeah. You're so intent on keeping that combo going sometimes that you run out of ammo because all the ammo's at the other end of the map because you didn't pick it up.
And it doesn't. What Mercenaries does is I think the starting point is always the same, apart from the placement of the the timers, and
Yes.
the bonus mayhems. The starting enemies are the same, but then after that, it's kind of all bets are off. I don't think, because if you're moving around and leading them around and you're not taking them out,
Totally.
you can't really have your run worked out. So there can be some surprises. And like I say, I was getting grabbed from behind, losing my combo, and just screaming at my TV. Yeah.
This is an odd question, but do you think Hunk reloads a lot slower than everybody else, or is it just me? Like, until he gets infinite ammo, obviously. He feels a
Luis
bit...
is the slowest, isn't he?
I have no idea. No idea. I'd have to compare. You get a YouTube going. Compare the reload speeds with.
He's definitely slow.
Leon's
He's
LE5.
definitely slow. Yeah.
It might be the weapon. Who knows? But yeah. I mean, he's not as broken as Krauser, absolutely, and maybe that's a downside to it as well, like his slow reload. It feels like that's easy to interrupt, certainly. Before we touch on maps a little bit, I did say we talk about music because it is certainly worth bringing up. There's a couple of some really cool stuff into this, and also, Mercenaries original had its own sort of plethora of original tracks. I say original, they all came from PNO3, another GameCube game, of course, but this time around, they are actually sort of original tracks. Andy, you mentioned Hunk's theme being sort of a reference to Remake 2. Did you also know it's a reference to the original RE2 as well? Because it has that in the sort of theme music about a minute and a half in as well, just tucked in there, which is a really, really nice touch. What did you think of the sort of new music in Mercenaries, Andy?
I don't think it's super stuck out to me, if in all honesty, but I suppose that is Resident Evil 4 remake all over, really. I don't think there's anything...
I agree with that.
Yeah, there's nothing like... that's... You know when you heard Serenity for the first time? Or you heard... Or like the typewriter theme or something like that. Like, these are like iconic music. I don't think modern... And again, it's a very small digression. I don't think modern Resident Evil remakes have like iconic soundtracks by design. It's almost just like atmospheric gumph,
Right.
which is okay, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's the theme of the remakes, and that does carry across to Mercenaries. Looming Dread was a bit of an anomaly, really.
Yeah.
Interesting. I'm sort of 50-50 on it myself, to be honest, because I really liked that they did. I know we all got a little bit bored of it because, again, RE-verse, and it was like the one track in the entire game.
Speak for yourself. I never got bored of it.
Well, there was danger of getting bored of it, at least. So it's like, you're kind of watering down how good this is, but it is good that it's here, and I didn't notice the RE2 original thing until it got pointed out to me, which is really cool. The other one I really, really like that's worth shouting out is that Leon's Mercenaries theme this time around is a big old reference to Resident Evil 2. It's kind of a remix of the sort of closing cutscene of the game with the train slowing down and them getting out, which is really, really neat. But I can't say I had much, positive to say about the other two particularly. Like, I literally don't know it. I can't think of Krauser's at all. All I can hear is the squishy noises of Ganado kneecaps exploding due to the knife. I don't remember the music. Steve, how did you feel about the new tracks in Mercenaries?
Well, starting from the off, the menu theme is, I don't think it's the PNO3 one entirely, but this one is clearly the one that's most referencing its original counterpart,
right.
which was like just bassy strings, very much the same kind of deal. I thought it was nice to see that reference, and then, yeah, like you said, Leon's being more of a Resident Evil 2 themed thing, like it's for Leon, is a great touch. Luis's is, I'm not sure if it is the approach to the village-like thing they use, but it could have easily been the one they used for the bonus stage. It feels like that kind of genre of music.
Yeah.
Which is fine, for everyone's favourite ladies' man with a monogrammed jacket, it works. Krauser's just feels like generic Terminator music.
Right.
Not gonna lie, it's just generic Terminator music, which is fine. He is the bloody Terminator in this game. It's all right. And yeah, Hunk's being a medley now as opposed to just Looming Dread, because I am in the camp of it's been overused a fair bit. Sorry, Kels. I love the track, but I love the track so much, but less than Capcom does. So it's glad that it's now got a new remix. Now honestly, I wish that, much like Andy said, the music of the remakes, while I can find it and enjoy it in a vacuum, a lot of the time becomes a bit wallpapery. So the fact that it's even here is nice. I still probably have a bit of nostalgia for the original stuff, but the fact that this is here, and especially Leon's being more of a emblematic to him tune, I think it's good. yeah, would I buy a separate soundtrack singles CD? Probably not, but it's all right.
Kelsey, what did you make of the music, other than being like a Looming Dread fanboy?
Yeah, I mean, I largely agree. Like, and with what Andy said about the remake soundtracks, like, it's not. I'm not going to say I disagree. Like, what I will say is there is basically like the odd track here and there across the remakes that I do think is superb, but then that's kind of it, and it doesn't. It pales in comparison to the iconic nature of the originals. Said on the main show, I'm a big fan of the new Del Lago theme, and that I can listen to outside of the game. That's just incredible. But what I think, just to add, like this game has done, the remake and Mercenaries, and which is present with Hunk's music and stuff, is I think more than any of the other remakes, Capcom dedicated a lot of time. It feels like they had a specific team where it was just their job to fit in some references and callbacks and throwbacks. Because there's loads in the main game, and I'm not going to list them off, but like off the top of my head, just isn't there the big one of the way that Ashley sits on the barrel is like some key art or something like that? When I see stuff like that, what that tells me is that the people who made this game cared about what they were doing. And Resident Evil has on occasion been in the hands of people that definitely don't care about what they're doing. And I think so much love has gone into this game. And whether you think Looming Dread is wearing thin on you or not, I just think they've gone out of their way to try and please people as much as possible. And not all of it's going to land. Some of it is going to be, like you say, wear a bit thin. But for me, lots of it does land. And I just like that the care has gone into, like the idea to cross, for Mercenaries mode in Remake 4, for them to sit there and go, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we combined Hunk's original theme and his new theme? Like, on paper, that idea is kind of really mental, cool. But they've done it, and that's so cool that they've done it. And it's taking risks and having fun, and a lot of Remake 4 is about having fun, and I like it. And to just touch on, the shooting range music and the remix of the Spanish music, like there's just things like that crop up time and time again across Mercenaries and the main game that I just want to give props to the team. I feel like they had fun making this game, and it shines through in lots of different ways.
On the barrel key art thing, as we talked about the campaign for 4 hours and still didn't manage to say everything that we wanted to say, because that is a really cool reference, and there is loads of really cool references throughout this game that extend into Mercenaries, as you just said. Thankfully, these kind of overshadow the terrible moment where Ashley says Master of Unlocking. That's good. That reference can get in the bin. Yeah. Anyway.
She just undid a bolt and she's suddenly the Master of Unlocking.
It's a little bit on the nose for me, I think.
I thought it was cute they worked it into dialogue, as a way someone would say it.
I'll take the Rev 2 one. That one works for me. That one just, I don't know. Anyway, that's a podcast for a few weeks ago. Let's talk finally about maps that we've got here. We've obviously talked about it a little bit already. The village, the castle, and the island. What's everyone's favourites and least favourites? Andy, how did you feel about the map selection? Anything that stood out to you that you liked the most?
I mean, obviously it was in line with the original, which is nice.
Yeah.
So they've remade Mercenaries very, very similar, which is nice. Again, I think if they're going to take this to the next level, we're going to need more. And I think we will get more. They're going to want to milk Resident Evil 4 Remake for as much as it's worth. So more maps, please. More maps, please. But the village is actually absolutely fantastic. It's probably the favourite out of the three that we've had.
It's the one that I go back to the most, actually. I find myself playing that the most. It's just perfectly built for Mercenaries, isn't it? It's just a beautiful combination of a big wide open space and then also lots of weaving stuff and going in and out of buildings and all those kind of things. It's pretty up there. Steve, any personal highlights or lowlights on the map selection so far?
Put another penny in this word jar. Okay. As someone who has had his absolute pushed in on professional difficulty, new game, and the village fight, specifically the opening village fight being one of the cruelest, hardest things in the entire game, in my opinion. It's nice that it's so goddamn easy in Mercenaries. It's like again, it's the perfect medication for that kind of stress, because you can just smash them left and right. I would actually argue it's a lot more stressful than its original counterpart as well, because obviously you can have multiple different kind of boss types. This crossbow guys, I swear TNT just comes from bloody nowhere on that stage. I think the re-envisioned village fight, if you will, is probably as the opening stage, it should be best foot forward. It's the E1M1 of the whole thing. But that's not to say that the other stages are slouches. I would argue that they're all fun in their own right, but the village is the one everyone's going to keep going back to try out new stuff. The water test level, the acid test level, rather.
I don't have any issue with any of them, to be fair. You're right, like the castle's quite interesting in the way that
they've got fixed weapons, which is unique to them. Each stage has its own unique thing.
I don't remember, was the castle map in the original game basically this section as well, or was it a different part of the castle? Because
in the original, there is like a extra internal area you couldn't get to before that leads up to the top battlements from another route, whereas now they've removed the shack at the top and you have a cannon you can use. So it's more remixed than its original counterpart significantly. And obviously there's turret guns you can use in the island, which you never had in the original.
Yeah, and also I guess it's worth saying the island, although I'd say the island is my least favourite of the three, possibly because it can be really, really challenging. I love the fact they changed it from night to day. I just think it's a really cool touch. I love that. It reminds me of booting up an old racing game and picking night or day. I like that we get to see that. KDB, what's your take on the maps so far?
Yeah, I think Village is my favourite as well. Castle is my least favourite because it's definitely the one I struggled the longest to get my high scores on. And it just feels like those the enemies on the castle, like the zealots, are kind of the most feeble, but they can be the most kind of tricksy, and they were the ones that were grabbing me and causing me a lot of stress. I hate the shields so much as well, the little shields that they carry.
Gloria la Plaga.
Gloria la Plaga.
Don't start.
And those guys, I like that they. So I guess they spawn depending on where you're stood at the time.
They can move around the map pretty quick as well, or rather, they teleport actually. But
and they can sometimes they spawn together, which is nice. You can get like a quick double kill on them. So I mean, I enjoyed them all. The island, I just think aesthetically is just the least interesting. Apart from, like you said, switching to day, that's cool. The village feels like to kind of quote Jordan, as he likes to say, like putting on a comfy pair of shoes. You can jump in and play Mercenaries in the village and feel right at home. Not too much to say really. Castle I've played the most, but only just because I failed it the most as well.
Fair, that's fair. Okay, cool. So let's wrap this up a little bit with our sort of future hopes and predictions for the Mercenaries. As we kind of alluded to, I think we all think there's probably more content coming, especially because there's content that was in the original that's not here, like the the Docks map. And Ada and West Coast.
Waterworld is what the strategy guide called it, which is very helpful.
Did it? Amazing.
Because Kevin Costner doesn't appear at all.
The Brady Games, what was it? The Brady Games strategy guide called it the Waterworld? Yes, agreed. What a strange choice that was.
So basically what you're saying is Kevin Costner is coming to the Mercenaries as an unlockable character.
Yeah, 10-foot bugger with a door-bladed chainsaw.
Yeah, that's a good point. You've got to wonder if that's in our future as well. Steve, any sort of future hopes or predictions for where Mercenaries could go?
Okay, so my prediction is that we're going to basically round out the original bout of content. We're going to get the Waterworld and we'll get Wesker and Ada whenever Separate Ways or whatever they're doing this season comes out. My hope, which totally unrealistic expectations, got to have them, right? You got to have them, got to dream, is that Capcom realise just how big a potential this game mode has, and it spins off into its own thing and becomes its own separate game. And maybe they talk to EA and some other people. We get a Silent Hill themed level with James. We get a Dead Space level with Isaac. Give them all fun, goofy stuff. Make it a proper mishmash enemy PvE game. Bringing characters from across series. That's the pie in the sky, never going to happen thing. But yeah, if we get any more content alone, I'd imagine it's going to be more RE Engine characters we've seen, like Jill or Chris, maybe, with some RE Engine monsters thrown in, hopefully. I would love a Baker Estate map, for example, or an RPD map with classic Claire. you could do a lot with it, and it's a shame because it's an untapped well, in my opinion. I feel like making the characters unique would be the challenge.
Yeah.
But expectations aren't that unrealistic. I expect us to get parity with the original RE4. Maybe if we're lucky, some of the VR versions mutators or challengers.
Yeah, I guess I'm almost exactly in the same boat, really, to be honest. My expectation is that we get to where we were with RE4, and maybe an additional character. It would be nice to see Ashley thrown in there, do something interesting, give her some blue flames to ward off some...
Give her the suplex.
Yeah, give her the Armadura warding off flames and maybe a ton of grenades or something rather than guns. Something really wacky and out there, because some of the characters, as we know, are already kind of out there with Krauser. Let's go in a different direction with it. I also would like to see this not necessarily become like a giant RE celebration hodgepodge in the way that RE-verse should have been, but that maybe it inspires a proper one. I don't think that's going to happen. I've asked everyone politely on Twitter to shout about Mercenaries as much as possible for that reason, but I don't know, to be honest. I'd also like to see co-op as well, actually. I will say that much. I mean, you would probably have to balance Krauser a little bit, admittedly, but does it really matter if it's just PvE and you're having fun? I don't know. Kelsey, you said, any expectations and hopes for you beyond co-op, or just expound on that?
Well, I can tell you what I don't want, and that's the Hound Wolf Squad. So,
yes!
Oh my word.
Keep
don't
them
say that.
the away from this game, please. So, yeah, I'm in agreement. I mean, I think what we're seeing with this is, because the RE engine is great, technically it's great, the gunplay is superb, as we all know, it's just showing the potential, like Steve said, for this to be a bigger package. They could do larger maps. There could be mini quests within the games. And I use the term quest kind of loosely there. It's just new challenges, things to do within the time apart from shoot enemies, things to grab.
Got to do my dailies. Suplex 40 Canados.
Yeah, exactly. We've all been going nuts over the main games challenges. You can work them into Mercenaries. Co-op, definitely. That was what I was going to say. It was one of my main notes. I definitely think co-op would be great. I know we're probably not the only people calling for that. I've seen a few people online say co-op would be amazing. Yeah, I had high hopes for Reverse, kind of, I guess, stupidly, but we didn't get it. This is like, see, Capcom, you can make, a fun bonus mode that isn't, it's not this isn't survival horror Mercenaries mode. It's a shooting mode, right. And it's kind of nonsense fun, but that doesn't mean it can't be awesome. And I would, if they want to add a few more characters for free, great. A couple of characters and a couple of maps or whatever they're going to do, like you say, bring it in line with the original. Cool. After that, if they want to say, oh, here's 3 more characters and 3 more maps and 2 weapons for 15 quid, I would pay it. I would 100% pay it. And I think it's kind of weird. I don't know why they don't do more of this stuff. I feel like it's money left on the table sometimes with Capcom. I haven't really seen many people responding negatively to Mercenaries other than, oh, it'd be great to have more. So, I'll take more. I'll pay for it. Make it happen.
Yeah, it's interesting because obviously there's the expectation. Steve, you said separate ways. Obviously, there's some expectation that that's going to come down the line. If we're getting an update to Mercenaries at the same time, it almost feels like they probably shouldn't do that. Because people will just talk about separate ways and not the Mercenaries. Like, you want to, if you can meter those things out, you might see the actual conversation about the Mercenaries more and kind of be able to decide whether or not it's worth pursuing more. But that's probably me overthinking the situation. Andy, any expectations or hopes for the future of Mercs?
Again, they're obviously onto something good. Mercenaries has been a staple in recent Resident Evil games. I just want to see more. Well, I retort some of your points that you said about RE-verse. They left a lot on the table. Mm-hmm. Even some of the maps that they used in RE-verse, they can quite comfortably make the transition over. They've made a bunch of stuff for Dead by Daylight. I'd like to see some of their maps come back across. There's tons of potential with the Mercenaries, and I think it was an interesting point one of you guys said about doing a standalone, kind of like what they did with the 3DS mode, but I mean that was locked on the 3DS, which was a real shame. just calling it the Mercenaries doesn't even have to be called Resident Evil the Mercenaries. It could just be called the Mercenaries, and then it could be this free to play game where they just every so often add just a random wacky, or have like chapters like they do in Dead by Daylight.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I think there's super mileage in that, because Mercenaries is an addicting game mode. Like if you could take any like competitive edge outside of speed running, like obviously Capcom's wanted that kind of esports competitive thing in Resident Evil. They just cannot get it right for whatever reason. Why can it not be Mercenaries? Why can that not be the mode that they take forward? I hope so. I hope they realise that, because there's tons of potential there.
They seem to be stuck on PvP, don't they? And they don't realise that PvE is still a viable option. There are games out there that, to varying amount of degrees, do have, groups of players, as we said, co-op, teaming up together to see how many enemies they can get through, to earn experience, to buy more costumes or whatever, and all this kind of stuff. Like, it's not like there isn't already proof that works with other series, but they seem like they just want to make a PvP game, and that's fair enough. But
I mean, a little bit of story time. RE5 Versus, which is basically the mercenaries from RE4 with, some competitive score attack elements so you can shoot other players. Me and a few other people back in the day, we would literally just gather up and say, right, let's just see if we can clear the entire board as a team. So, there'd be two separate groups of players, but we'd all be fighting the monsters together and trying to not friendly fire each other in a PvE way, and then we'd occasionally compare scores and stuff afterwards. Players would like to shoot monsters together as a team, Capcom.
Yes.
Exoprimal, they actually listened to fan feedback, didn't they? And they're making PvE co-op modes.
Yes.
So there's hope, maybe, that one executive who's obsessed with PvP Resident Evil can finally shut the F up and other people can have a go with the toys. Mm-hmm. This is the way in. A finally playable Akuma, just put it out there.
Yeah, let's go.
Goofy Capcom stuff. Capcom's at its best when it's doing the goofy stuff and not just phoning it in. No offense to RE-verse, but like that.
Nah, all offense to RE-verse.
I was just saying.
We'd be ripping the lid
just to
off.
reiterate, no Hound Wolf. No, I'm done with goggled men. Okay.
Sorry, are we talking about the iconic Resident Evil characters, the Hound Wolf Squad? Is that who
Andy,
you're
can you name them all for me?
Okay, wolf eyes, foreskin.
Amazing.
Tundra, K9, sod the rest of them.
Yeah, Steve, you don't count.
Tragedy,
know everything
absolute
anyway.
tragedy.
I feel like we were ripping it off too much. It's a conversation for another podcast, absolutely. However you feel about Outbreak and the banging of that drum, the core principle of Outbreak is players playing together, as you say, Steve. That's what people actually want. Whether you think Outbreak would work in the modern era or not. It's banding up together to have a unique experience. So hopefully the Exoprimal thing is an indication that maybe somewhere down the line, maybe the end of the RE Engine era, we get a celebration of what was, and we get a big old Mercenary standalone. But I guess we'll see what becomes of RE4 Mercenaries within the coming months or whatever. But nothing else remains for me but to thank our contributors, our patrons, and our listeners. Join the First Aid Spray Discord server to become part of our community and hear the show early and unedited. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. All of these links and all of our content can be found at faspraypod.com. You can listen to the podcast on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, and all good podcasting apps. And if you like what you hear, please do leave us a review where you can and spread the good word. Don't forget you can support the show by picking up some merch or at patreon.com/FASprayPod for as little as $1 a month. In our next episode, we return to the Wildstorm universe of Resi to check out the next volume of Comic Club with Resident Evil Fire and Ice. Thank you to the panel. You can follow all of us individually. I'm at Siniac_123. Steve is at FB Steve Was Taken. Kelsey is at K_D_B_, and Andy is at Biohazard Declassified. And finally, thank you for listening and have a good week. We're already beyond time, so let's just do it, I guess.
Over to you, boss.
God, it's warm in here. feel like I say that or the reverse of that at the beginning of every podcast.
Make sure you say
the temperature of my room every time.
Yeah, you have to. Tell us when you're just right, when that day comes. I'm just right today.
The Goldilocks episode, that'll be. Christ. Okay.